That's Steve Faccenda, who's my guest here on the Saturday Forum this morning on Gaydio with myself, Andrew Edwards. And we're talking about cancer today on the Saturday Forum, and in particular at this point, Steve's experience of living with a glioblastoma multiforme brain tumour, and he's just been outlining the process of diagnosis. I want to ask you now, Steve, I mean, you know, that's a huge set of changes, of stressful experiences, to put it mildly. Obviously, this has meant a huge change in your life since last autumn. I just wonder if you'd say a little bit about just what changes it's meant and how you're coping with them.
Well, it's basically turned my world upside down. I now have to think before I do anything. I can't just run off to the shops. After my surgery, for example, I'd walk to the end of the road. I'd be very, very tired. That's just a symptom of brain surgery overall, let alone the routines I have to now take for my chemotherapy, for my radiotherapy, and the amount of times I have to go to the hospital for those.
Are you actually having active treatment at the moment?
I am actually on a monthly cycle at the moment where I have chemotherapy for 5 days, and then I have 23 days off. I've just started my next routine, so that's going to happen. I've got another 5 months after this one.
So each time that happens, you have to get used to that. That's a very stressful and sort of difficult process you're outlining.
Well, it seems to be very simple. I just take a handful of tablets every day for 5 days. That's the easy part. It's the fact that it destroys my immune system for a couple of weeks, so I have to then think I can't just go out, because if people have got coughs and colds, which happened a couple of weeks ago on my first round, just somebody had a little bit of a sniffle, and I caught a really bad chesty cough, which put me in hospital for the night. So I have to think, and we all have to think, all my family, before we do anything, for like the 2 or 3 weeks after my chemotherapy, whilst my body builds itself back up again. And it's all just looking forward. Can I do this? And I've never wanted to say, sorry, I can't do that, but I do have to occasionally say, look, I can't come. Like if in a couple of weeks, we're going to friends for a couple of days away, and I have said to them, look, if you are even remotely snivelly, or I can't put myself at that risk. So I take immunoboosters every day. As a matter of course, my partner takes them, so that, because he's most close in contact with me, he takes them so that his body's slightly above everybody else's, so that it stays away. But the situation would be the same. If he was ill, I would have to stay away from him as well. So
that's potentially very difficult. I mean,
yeah, it would be.
You know, practical and emotional. I mean, you know, you've been very rational in this interview, in the sense of you're talking beautifully, eloquently, and I'm very touched and grateful about, you know, these practical ways of looking at your management of your illness. I can't imagine what it must have been like to get the diagnosis.
I could say what it would, but it's probably not airable on radio. It's a bit of a big kick in the stomach. But it was bizarre on the day I was actually told of my diagnosis and my prognosis as well. Everything sort of just shut down. And it was my partner, to be fair, that took all the information, all the knowledge from the doctors, and I just sort of, I sort of removed myself from myself, and I just kept going. I remember the day, the hospital was actually, fortunately for me, at the end of my road. And it is a long road to walk down, but that was the longest walk back ever. I got home. I remember I was actually vacuuming before I went to the hospital, and I left the Hoover in the lounge. I sat on the sofa and I cried and I cried and I cried. And then it was like, right, well, this floor is just not going to vac itself. And it was like, carry on. Would you like a cup of tea? And it's as though nothing had been said, and I just carried on. And I have broke down on many occasions, both publicly and on my own. And I've got that out of my system now. And in my personal view, I can either just go with this and just, I don't know, just go with it and let it eat me up, or go with it and roll with the smooth, as it were. So.
It sounds to me tremendously brave, and using resources of personal strength, emotional and physical and psychological, that are beyond my comprehension, really.
I've never thought about it before. I've thought about people in other situations similar to mine with cancers, or I've actually lost on New Year's Eve, not last year, the year before, one of my relatives to cancer, and I saw her suffer through that one. And I found she was very strong, but I've never thought about it in a personal respect of how I would cope. And it's, I suppose, it's not something that generally pops into your head. But it was actually my auntie's husband that said to me, he said, you've got two choices, because he'd seen his wife die and such. He said, you can either go to bed, and this is, I've said this to a couple of cancer victims now, and one person broke down and one person said, you know, you're absolutely right. He said, you can go to bed, pull the duvets over your head and die. And just don't do anything with it. Or you can stand up and fight it. He said, you don't know what the outcome is, but you can fight it and enjoy what you have left and what time you have left.